Welcome to the Women Veterans Alliance webinar. I'm Melissa Washington. I am the CEO and founder of Women Veterans Alliance, and I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar today. If you're not familiar with our organization, we are a nationwide organization with our mission. We are here to connect you, women veterans, with each other and resources. And one of those ways we connect you is through our webinars. And again, so glad you are all here. If you haven't heard, we have launched Women Veterans Magazine. We have Women Veterans Oregon and Women Veterans Colorado. That is coming up in in 2023. The deadline is December 15th. So if you're interested in submitting an article or having your photo on the cover for Oregon or Colorado, please get that done by December 15th. For those issues. Also, too, we have Women Veterans Texas, Florida, and DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Texas one will be out hopefully within the next couple weeks. We are starting our launch parties for Texas. October 5th will be our launch party in Arlington, Texas, for Texas, and still working on the other locations as well. If you want more information, you can visit womenveteransmagazine.com. If you're not connecting with us, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So you will find this recording as well as all of our previous webinars on our YouTube channel. So feel free to subscribe there. And also to like and connect with us on social media. Our upcoming events. Well, today we have Rita Henry. And then on Thursday, if you are interested in possibly writing a book, or maybe somebody said, hey, you should write a book, I definitely recommend you find us on the 25th, which will be in 2 days, August 25th. And then next Monday, August 29th, I am the host of Women Veterans in Business radio show. And we will have Sean Barnwell, who will be my guest on August 29th. And more information can be found on the events section of our website. And if you haven't heard, we have coming up September 9th and 10th is our Women Veterans Engage event. And this is taking place at locations throughout the US. If you're not in one of those locations, you can join us online, but definitely register. The deadline is on Monday, the 29th is the deadline to register. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in attending this event, to visit womenveteransengage.com. It's going to be a fantastic weekend. We've got some phenomenal speakers lined up, and we're also partnering with a lot of other nonprofits throughout the US to be able to bring this opportunity and to connect with women veterans where they're at. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Rita Henry. She is an intuitive guide and healer who helps people who are tired of being on the struggle bus and want the pain to go away. She's gotten her ass kicked and she helps others unkick theirs. So without further ado, Rita, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. I love it. And I want to make sure my screen is set up so I see all of you beautiful people. Of course, as Melissa had shared, you can keep your cameras off, but if you're open to it, I love seeing your beautiful faces. So please feel free to know that often we don't recognize, we get to have communities and we get to come together and be supported. And Melissa, I want to thank you for that introduction. And also, it's such an honor to be here. And I want to thank all of you for taking a road that oftentimes has been unconventional, right? Being a part of the military. My father was in the military, and it was quite the experience hearing about the stories. I didn't actually live, and I wasn't raised as a brat, although my brothers may tell you otherwise. And it's really great to know that we get to be exactly where we are, have the experiences that we have, and to normalize a lot of them. When we talk about the topic of relationships, when people aren't who we want them to be, it's really great to know that crappy relationships aren't a life sentence. They're really an invitation for us to see what's coming up for us to heal. And once we name what we're experiencing, then we can really focus on how we can heal, how we can really empower ourselves. And once we really get to the core of recognizing that all relationships are a reflection of our relationship with ourselves. And I can't stress that enough. And I was clueless. And again, I got my booty kicked in many, many experiences. And I'll share some of those with you as we move on. So, without knowing our own self-worth, even when other people love us, and it's wonderful to connect with others, but without knowing our own self-worth, it's not sustainable to feel good without that love of self. I once asked a client if she loved herself, and her response was, I do, I get my nails done. And I chuckled, and we had a laugh about that because she really wasn't kind to herself in her own mind, in her own thoughts. And it was a really triggering experience for her again and again. So when we realize that all relationships are a reflection of our relationship with ourselves, then everything changes, because this, in case you haven't noticed, this is a world of insanity. Does anyone agree? Like, the world is crazy in so many ways. And so here's one of the secrets that I want to share with you. World peace is an inside job. And once I recognized that, being the youngest of 5 children and having a father who was, one of the only emotions he was really comfortable sharing was rage and anger, and mom walking on eggshells along with all of us kids and innocently not knowing any other way. And then as I moved into my own experience of adulting, I found love in what I thought love was. And I married an angry man, so I could walk on eggshells. And I was desperate to get the approval, especially of men. And by walking on eggshells, I just perpetuated the same patterns that I knew. And it was super painful. It was every bit as glamorous as you think. And it was very human, but it helped me to really take a deep dive into my own work. And really an impetus for doing my own work was when my oldest, who just turned 28 years old, was born. I already had had a 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old boys. And then my identical twin daughters were born. And my daughter, Amy, died in my arms when she was 9 days old. The girls were born 15 weeks prematurely. And it was really life altering for me and sent me into a place of, okay, what's real and what's not? Because I had been giving away a lot of my power to looking outside myself. And so 2 years after Amy died, I checked myself into a hotel for a weekend, and I just really spent a lot of time reflecting and sobbing. And I wanted to know, like, okay, Amy, you came into my life, and we give everything all the meaning that it has. And it was clear to me that Amy's presence in my life was a gift for me to wake up and show the fuck up in my life, like take ownership and really be present in my life in a way that I didn't know was possible. And so I didn't know exactly what that meant, right? But I allowed myself to dig in and to start to explore what that meant to me. And eventually I found energy work. And energy work is really just, think about it as love and truth. That's what it's really all about. So today we get to take a deep dive into exploring crappy relationships and recognizing when people aren't who you want them to be, there's another way. Like, how can you heal? And also recognizing that often we aren't the people that we want to be, and we don't have to make that wrong. So it took me a while to realize I gave until it hurts and then gave some more. And by the way, I can see, like, my sense is everyone here, and I want to hear in the chat room if this is a reflection of you. I was an overgiver. Like, I would give until it hurts, give some more, crash and burn, rise from the ashes. And giving was just a really big thing. Well, the reality is when we give, it's the control position, right? If you give something to me, then I'm not in control of what you're going to give me. So it's really a trust issue. Can we sink in and can we really feel safe? And so with that, I was ultimately able to realize my happiness isn't anyone else's responsibility. And it took me a really, really long time to realize that I teach people how to treat me. And if someone isn't treating me the way that I want them to, what am I going to do about it? Well, the whole reflection of I teach people how to treat me, it's I wanted other people to love me. I wanted other people to choose me. And yet, when I really got quiet and looked at my life and how I was experiencing it, I wasn't choosing myself. I wasn't loving myself. Again, I was looking without instead of looking within. So I want to share with you 4 different ways in relationships that we look at and ways we lose ourselves. And then for a couple of you, if you're open to it, we'll stop the recording and we'll do some coaching if you're inspired. Like, okay, this is my situation. And we just want to connect with, like, it's a girls' night out, right? We're just here to recognize we get to be human. And in our humanity, we learn through contrast. So some of the experiences in my life where I absolutely got my ass kicked, those were some of the most informative, life-altering, best gifts I could have ever received. Even down to the fact of being grateful for a lot of the pain and struggle I experienced. And a lot of times we want to make the pain wrong, but to be alive means we will experience pain. And again, if you look around this planet, we learn through contrast. It's an insane world. So if we don't make the contrast wrong, but we really focus on, wait a minute, this is happening, who am I in relationship to it? Everything changes. So let's look at 4 different relationship issues that I see as I work with clients on the daily, on the regular, right? Humanity. And by the way, I can relate to all of these. This isn't like I'm up on some pedestal, right? I am qualified to support other people because of how thoroughly I've done the exact opposite and got my booty kicked. So we all get to be recognized, we're all stronger together. The first relationship issue I want to talk about is you think that you want your partner to be emotionally available. And I'll have women come in and they'll share with me that they just want their partner to be more emotionally available. And yet, often when they start to show emotions in different ways, then they actually end up punishing them because they get shaky. You're my rock. You're supposed to be solid. You're supposed to have the answers. And we need to recognize that if we want to be in balance for all of us, it's about experiencing the yin and the yang, the masculine and feminine, our wholeness in each and every one of us. It's such a beautiful invitation to not have to live from a place of anger and suppress, repress, depress, because that's what I was taught. Again, my dad was most comfortable with anger and rage. He could do that really, really well. And no one else in the household was allowed to do anger. So until I started doing my work in a really, really messy way, because I didn't even know anything else was an option, then I needed to get clean and open and heal in my relationship to anger. And by the way, when people are angry or when you're angry, you know what's really going on? You're afraid. That is such a key component in relationships to recognize when I'm angry, when they're afraid. Somebody cuts you off in traffic and you redline or they redline. Why? They're afraid they're going to get in an accident. They're afraid they're going to be late. They're afraid the other person isn't respecting them and isn't treating them with respect. It's such a common thing. So again, relationship issue number one, allowing and saying you want somebody to be present, to be vulnerable, to be open with you. But when they do, because you haven't met those emotions inside of yourself, you haven't healed that, you can't be a safe place for them to share their fears with you. So just be thoughtful about that and consider how that, if that, relates to you. The second relationship issue I want to share is we're often confused about what we really want, right? We're maybe attracted to someone for their spontaneous ways, how they're so playful, they get us out of our head, and they're just the individual who knows how to have a lot of fun, and we're so serious all the time. And then all of a sudden, when this couple becomes a couple, then or it could be a child relationship or a parental relationship, and then all of a sudden you want to punish them because they're spontaneous, they may be spontaneous, playful, and outgoing, but then all of a sudden, as your partner, they're not adulting, they're irresponsible, they're the fun parent. And so just recognize and take a deep breath and just feel into, oh, isn't that interesting? I was really attracted to this because it's something that I'm not necessarily good at. And yet then I want to go ahead and punish them because they're not what I'm most comfortable with. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later here soon. Relationship issue number 3. We often fall in love. In fact, those who have your cameras on, I'd love to see your hand raised. We often fall in love with a possibility instead of a reality. Yeah, a couple of us. Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have to make ourselves wrong for these relationships that aren't loving, aren't kind, and aren't working for us, but they're lessons, right? So you may be crushing super hard on the dude that you worked with. He's tall, dark, handsome, and absolutely dreamy and the perfect man in your fantasies. But remember, fantasies and nightmares are the opposite side of the same coin, and neither one of them is real, and both are painful ways to live. So allowing ourselves to not make ourselves wrong, but recognize we often don't want the truth. I was married with my ex-husband for 27 years, and I never thought I'd get married again once I divorced, but I did end up getting married again, and my husband and I have been married for 8 years. But the reason why my relationship with my husband now is so good, it's because I changed my relationship with myself. I was the key. I was the reason why I was having a challenge and had crappy relationships. And once I really recognized whenever I am triggered, there is something coming up for me to heal, even when the other person is being an asshole. Okay? If someone tells me, in fact, I was recently on social media attacked by someone in my family who's not my children or anything like that, but my family of origin. And it was really a vulnerable thing, but I was just able to see that the attack had nothing to do with me. And it really wasn't personal, even though it felt personal. But I could only get to that conclusion through doing my own work and really recognizing my family of origin and all the lies of omission. I was raised with don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And when we do that, we end up suppressing, repressing, and depressing, and we lose ourselves. And let's be clear, that is the number one contributor to crappy relationships, is we lose ourselves. We have that crappy relationship with ourselves. So again, falling in love with a possibility instead of a reality is we aren't used to truth. We aren't used to honesty. And then when we lose ourselves, it's a very slippery slope. And the reality is, I looked outside of myself for others to make me happy. If my children were happy, if my husband was happy, if my family of origin was happy, if my workplace was happy, and that meant often working 60 to 80 hours a week. If they were happy, then I could be happy. And I really appreciate that I'm not the only one, right? Allow yourself to just take a deep breath and recognize, okay, yeah, I love the nodding heads, because just because you've had the toxic experience and the toxic relationship doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It means you had an experience. And a lot of times, whether it's abuse, I work with a lot of people who have PTSD or stored trauma or abuse, even including sexual abuse. All of those experiences are not the truth of who you are. Thank God. They do shape us. Our experiences do shape us, but they don't define us. And once we recognize that I am not my experiences, then we can have a complete and total experience. And I love in the chat room, someone shared that they cut out family members because of the differences. And sometimes toxic people and toxic relationships need to recognize, we need to recognize sometimes we can love people from a distance. And that doesn't make it any less loving and kind. But being present and receiving abuse from others isn't kind, isn't loving, and it doesn't leave us having our own back. And then the fourth relationship issue is we often want our partners to change, so we don't have to. Okay, anyone in on this? Has anyone ever wanted their partner to change so you didn't have to, or your family of origin, or your children? And if you don't have your hands raised, you're living in that fantasy place, right? So let's talk about it. There is an individual. She wanted her husband to quit drinking. He was an alcoholic, and she hounded him for 8 years to stop drinking. And so 8 years later, he finally stops drinking. And then a year after that, she divorced him and married another alcoholic, right? She was so comfortable with her patterns of control, of codependency. This doesn't make her a bad person, but it is really important to recognize that 95% of what we do is unconscious and subconscious. So then when I found and was introduced to energy work, I recognized this isn't woo-woo, this isn't way out there. This is the most practical thing, because it's just seeing the energies, it's seeing the patterns, it's seeing how I wanted my ex-husband to grow and to change, and so that I didn't end up feeling abandoned and rejected. I was actually trying to manipulate him into his healing so that I wouldn't have to change. And it's quite stunning in how